promoters or advance men or managers were paying disc jockeys X dollars to play their client's record.
To get music to the right person unsolicited is very tough.
There was great pressure from record companies or managers or performers to get their records played.
In the late 1990s, you called into Hot 97 to request your favorite song. You thought your vote counted.
I've had more yays, we should continue playing his music, compared to the nays.
It didn't. The song was already paid for, the playlist was already set, and the man who said it wasn't the DJ, wasn't the program director, and wasn't the artist.
Promoters or advance men or managers were paying disc jockeys X dollars to play their client's record.
He was someone you have never heard of, operating out of an office nobody was supposed to know existed. This is the story of the men who decided what a generation was allowed to hear. In the late 1990s, Ja Rule was on every radio station in America. So was DMX. So was Eminem. What none of their fans knew, and what the artists themselves may not have fully understood, was that their records did not get to those stations purely because of talent or demand. Someone got paid to put them there, and it was not the artists. Jeff McClusky ran one of the most powerful independent radio promotion companies in America through the late 1990s and early 2000s, and almost nobody outside the music industry knew his name. That was the job. Labels paid men like McClusky to sit between them and the radio stations and make sure the right records got played at the right stations at the right time. He was the invisible infrastructure between a recording session and a hit record. The artist on the radio had no idea he existed. He charged accordingly. McClusky and his peers, men like Andre Aganis and Joseph Isgro, were the architects of a shadow economy.
Joe was there. He was like the vice president or something, I'm saying, because Joe was instrumental in putting out that record.
They didn't just suggest songs, they curated the national consciousness. To a major label, an indie promoter was a necessary middleman who offered plausible deniability. To a radio station, they were a secondary payroll. The promoter was the fixer of the FM dial, ensuring that the friction of federal law never slowed down the momentum of a corporate priority. The system worked like this. A label finishes a record. They want it on urban radio. They cannot pay the station directly. That is illegal under federal Payola statutes that date back to a 1960 scandal that almost destroyed the radio industry.
And this became a big scandal, eventually.
So instead, the label pays an independent promoter. The promoter has relationships with program directors at stations across the country. The promoter passes money to those program directors as consulting fees, promotional payments, event sponsorships, arrangements that are technically legal because nobody writes a check that says pay for play on the memo line. The record gets played, the promoter gets paid, the label gets their artist on the radio, and the program director at the station gets a payment that never appears in any official accounting of how the record got added to the playlist. The consulting fees often took the form of lavish research trips to Las Vegas, high-end electronics delivered to residential addresses, or marketing grants that supposedly went towards station vans but ended up in private pockets. Some promoters were known to provide promotional support in the form of cold, hard cash inside envelopes handed over at industry dinners in Midtown Manhattan. The paperwork was a masterpiece of creative accounting, designed to withstand a cursory glance while hiding a billion-dollar bribe. Hot 97 in New York, Power 105. Radio stations in Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, every major urban radio market in the country operated inside this system simultaneously throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. Program directors were not picking the music their listeners heard based on what they thought was good or what the audience was requesting. They were picking based on who had paid for the slot. The public believed they were participating in a cultural conversation. They called in to request lines, thinking their voices mattered.
I've had more yays, we should continue playing his music, compared to the nays.
In reality, the most requested lists were often predetermined. If a label had paid for 30 spins a week, the station would find a way to justify those spins, even if the phones were silent. The listeners weren't the customers. They were the product being sold back to the labels. The artists whose records were getting played were at the top of the system. The artists whose records were not getting played were at the bottom of it. The difference between those two positions was not always talent. It was often money. A record on an independent label without the budget to pay for promotion did not get on Hot 97 regardless of what it sounded like.
It's kind of hard for independents because they don't have the connections or the ties that a major has.
A record on a major label with a promotion budget and an independent promoter with the right relationships got added to rotation while the artist was still finishing the album. This is the thing that the era's biggest names, Ja Rule, DMX, Eminem, Jay-Z, were built inside of without most of them knowing it. Their records were good. They were also paid for in a way that had nothing to do with how good they were. When DMX's Rough Riders anthem or Ja Rule's Always on Time began their ascent, the momentum was artificially accelerated. The labels would buy the chart position by flooding key markets with promotional dollars. By the time the song actually caught fire with the public, the Cartel had already ensured it was the only thing the public was allowed to hear.
If a song's very similar to a song that's already currently on the radio, it can lead to a lawsuit.
It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you hear a song 20 times a day, you eventually believe you like it. In 2002, New York State Attorney General Eliot Spitzer opened an investigation into the major labels and their relationships with independent radio promoters. What his office found over the next 3 years was not surprising to anyone inside the industry. It was a systematic, documented, industry-wide pay-for-play network that had been operating openly for over a decade. Internal emails obtained during the investigation showed label executives discussing specific payments to secure specific songs, specific airplay at specific stations. One email from a Sony BMG executive referred to independent promotion payments as the cost of doing business. Another described the promotion system as something every label used because no label could afford not to. Spitzer's investigators uncovered flyaway contests that didn't exist, where the winner was actually a station employee's relative, and research projects that consisted of nothing more than a promoter asking a program director how much to play the new Jennifer Lopez single. The audacity was breathtaking. The industry hadn't just bypassed the law. It had built a parallel legal system where bribery was a line item in the annual budget.
Disc jockeys were taking part of the publishing rights of a song as their payoff.
In 2005, Sony BMG settled with Spitzer's office for $10 million. Warner Music settled for $5 million. Universal Music settled for $12 million. EMI settled for $3.5 million. Combined, the four major labels paid over $30 million rather than go to trial and have the full scope of the system examined in open court. No criminal charges were filed. No program director went to prison. No independent promoter was convicted of anything. The settlements were civil. Everyone paid and went back to work. The money paid in fines was a fraction of the profits generated by the records that the system had manufactured. For the labels, $30 million was simply a late-stage tax on a decade of unprecedented revenue. The radio cartel hadn't been dismantled. It had been audited.
But today you got program formats on radio, so it's a little bit harder. I mean, it comes from over the top.
Ja Rule's commercial peak, the period when he was genuinely inescapable on radio. When Murder Inc. was the hottest label in hip-hop and his voice was on every station in America, sits directly inside the years this system was running at full capacity. His records were on those stations because Irv Gotti's label paid to put them there through a system that everyone in the industry used and nobody talked about publicly. That is not an accusation. It is a description of how every major act of that era got on the radio. Ja Rule, DMX, Eminem, Jay-Z. All of them. The system did not discriminate by artist. It discriminated by budget. The artists whose records were just as good but whose labels could not afford the promotion never got the airplay. They never got the sales. They never got the careers. Most of them nobody has ever heard of. That is the point. There is an entire generation of ghost classics. Songs that could have defined the era but were buried because their labels couldn't meet the indie promoter's price. The cultural landscape of the 2000s was not a meritocracy. It was a curated exhibit. The radio dial was a real estate market, and the poor were evicted before they could ever move in. Eliot Spitzer went on to become governor of New York. He resigned in 2008 following a prostitution scandal.
A woman is making shocking allegations against Eliot Spitzer years after a prostitution scandal forced him to resign as New York governor.
The independent radio promotion system he investigated was quietly rebuilt in modified form after the settlements. The labels paid their fines and adjusted the paperwork. The names changed. Independent promotion became strategic marketing partnerships, but the gate remained locked. Today, the battlefield has shifted to streaming playlists and curated algorithms, yet the same invisible hands often pull the strings. The fine print in the contracts evolved to satisfy the regulators, but the core truth of the music business remained untouched. The music on the radio kept sounding exactly the same.